Welcome to the Thea Lee Podcast. Today is February 7th, 2026, and we are on day 38 of reading through the Bible. Today, God gives the people of Israel the Ten Commandments. He starts out with number 1, I am the Lord your God, who rescued you from the land of Egypt, the place of your slavery. You must not have any other God but me. Number 2, you must not make any idols of any kind of image from the heavens or earth or the sea. You must not bow down to them or worship them, because I am a jealous God. I will not tolerate your affection for any other gods. And then he adds on to it and says that he lays the sins of the parents upon their children on the 3rd and 4th generations from those people who reject him. But then in turn, he lavishes unfailing love for 1,000 generations for those who love him and obey his commands. Number 3, he says, do not misuse the name of the Lord your God. God will not let you go unpunished if you misuse his name. Number 4, to observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy, that you have 6 days to do your work, but on the 7th day you rest, and this is because the Lord made the world in 6 days, and on the 7th day he rested, and that includes your sons and daughters and male and female servants. Number 5, honor your father and mother, then you will live a long, full life in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. Number 6, do not commit murder. Number 7, do not commit adultery. Number 8, do not steal. Number 9, do not testify falsely against your neighbor. Number 10, you must not covet your neighbor's house. You must not covet your neighbor's wife, male or female servant, ox or donkey, or anything else that belongs to your neighbor. Then it goes on to talk about when the people heard the thunder and the loud blast of the ram's horn, and when they saw the flashes of lightning and the smoke billowing from the mountain, they stood at a distance and they were trembling with fear. So they told Moses, you speak to us. You come and tell us what God says, but don't let God speak directly to us, because we will die. And Moses says, don't be afraid. He said, God has come in this way to test you, and your fear is actually good. It's just going to keep you from sinning. But the people stood at a distance, and then Moses went and approached the dark cloud where God was. So then God tells Moses, tell the people of Israel, you saw for yourselves that I spoke to you from heaven. So remember, you must not make any idols of silver or gold to rival me. Build for me an altar made of earth, and offer your sacrifices to me, your burnt offerings and peace offerings, your sheep and goats and your cattle. Build my altar wherever I cause my name to be remembered, and I will come to you and bless you. But then he talks about how if they use stones to build an altar, they should not shape them or cut them in any way. They should use them in their natural form. And then they should not approach the altar by going up steps, because if you do, someone might look up under your clothing and see your nakedness. Then it moves on to talking about fair treatment of slaves. So slaves were allowed and weren't considered a bad thing, evidently. But they came with regulations. If you buy a Hebrew slave, he may serve no more than 6 years for you, and he gets set free on the 7th year, and he will owe you nothing for his freedom. If he was single when he came to you, then he leaves single. If he was married when he became a slave, then his wife must be freed with him. If his master gave him a wife while he was a slave, and they had sons or daughters, then his wife and children stay with the master. But he can say that he wants to stay and he doesn't want to be free because he loves his family. And so then they go out into the doorpost, publicly pierce his ear with an awl, and after that the slave will serve his master for life. And then it says, if a man sells his daughter as a slave, she will not be freed at the end of 6 years as the men are. But if she doesn't satisfy her owner, he can allow her to be bought back again, but he cannot sell her to foreigners, since he is the one who broke the contract with her. But if the slave owner arranges for her to marry his son, then she's no longer a slave. Now she's a daughter. And then if a man has married a slave wife and then takes another wife for himself, he still must take care of his first wife. He must provide her with food, clothing, and intimacy. If he fails to do any of those 3 obligations, then she can leave as a free woman without making any payment. Next, we move on to cases of personal injury and their consequences. So if anyone assaults and kills someone, they're put to death. But if it was an accident, then God will appoint a place of refuge so they can go and run for safety. But if someone deliberately kills someone, then they are put to death. If anyone strikes their father or mother, they are put to death. Kidnappers must be put to death. Anyone who dishonors father and mother must be put to death. Talks about if 2 men fight and one hits the other with a stone or a fist, and the injured person does not die but is confined to bed, If he can walk again later, even with a crutch, then the assailant will not be punished, but he has to compensate the victim for lost wages and provide for his full recovery. If a man beats his male or female slaves with a club and they die, then the owner must be punished. Not necessarily put to death, just punished. But if the slave recovers within a day or two, then the owner is not punished because they are his property. And then it says if two men are fighting and in the process they accidentally bump into a pregnant woman and she gives birth prematurely, if no further injury results, then the man who struck the woman must pay the amount of compensation to the woman's husband and what he demands and what the judges approve. But if there is further injury, the punishment must match the injury. A life for a life, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a hand for a hand, a foot for a foot, a burn for a burn, a wound for a wound, and a bruise for a bruise. If a man hits his female slave or male slave in the eye and the eye is blinded, then he has to let them go free to compensate for the eye. If he knocks out one of the teeth of his male or female slave, then he must let them go free to compensate for the tooth. Then it talks about if an ox gores a man or woman to death, then the ox must be stoned, and his flesh may not be eaten. In such a case, though, the owner will not be held liable. But if this is an ox that has a reputation for goring and the owner has been informed but did not keep it under control, if the ox then kills someone, it must be stoned and the owner must also be put to death. However, if the dead person's relatives accept it, they can pay to compensate for the loss of life, and the owner of the ox may redeem his life by paying whatever is demanded. The same regulation applies if an ox bores a girl or a boy. If the ox scores a slave, either male or female, the animal's owner must pay the slave's owner 30 silver coins, and the ox must be stoned. Then it says, if somebody digs a pit and uncovers it and fails to cover it, and an ox or a donkey falls into it, then the owner must pay full compensation for the other animal. If an ox injures a neighbor's ox and they die, then the two owners must go together, sell the live ox, and divide the price equally between them, and then they can also divide the dead animal. But again, if that ox has a reputation for goring and the owner failed to keep it under control, then the owner must pay full compensation. So then it talks about protection of property. If someone steals an ox or sheep and kills and sells it, the thief must pay back 5 oxen for each stolen ox and 4 sheep for each stolen sheep. If the thief is caught in the act of breaking into a house and is killed in the process, the person who killed the thief is not guilty of murder. But if it happens in daylight, the one who killed the thief is guilty of murder. So you can only kill the thief if it's nighttime, I guess. A thief who is caught must pay in full for everything he stole. If he can't pay, he must be sold as a slave to pay for his theft. If someone steals an ox or a donkey or sheep and is found in the thief's possession, then the thief must pay double the value. If an animal is grazing in a field or vineyard and it gets over into someone else's field to graze, then the owner of that animal must pay compensation from their own grain or grapes. And if you are burning some thorn bushes on your land and the fire goes into your neighbor's land, then the one who started the fire must pay for the lost crop. And then suppose someone leaves money or goods with a neighbor for safekeeping and they're stolen from the neighbor's house. If the thief is caught, then the compensation is double the value of what was stolen. But if the thief isn't caught, then that neighbor must appear before God, and God will determine if he stole the property or not. If there's a dispute between two people over who owns a particular ox or donkey or article of clothing or any lost property, both parties come before God, and the person that God declares guilty must pay double compensation for that item. And then it talks about if someone leaves a donkey, ox, sheep, or any other animal with a neighbor for safekeeping, but it dies or is injured or gets away and no one sees what happens, then the neighbor must then take an oath in the presence of the Lord. If the Lord confirms the neighbor didn't steal the property, the owner must accept the verdict and no payment will be required. But if the animal was stolen, the guilty person must pay compensation. Or if it was torn to pieces by a wild animal, there must be shown evidence and then no compensation is required. And if someone borrows an animal from a neighbor and it's injured or dies, if the owner is absent, then the person who borrowed it must pay full compensation. But if the owner is present, no compensation is required. And no compensation is required if the animal is rented because the loss is covered by the rental fee. So here we are, it's more than 3,000 years ago, and we have our first laws and rules and consequences. So those people who don't think that we should have government and don't think that we should have laws, they've been around for over 3,000 years. Some of these laws or rules obviously are different than what we believe today. So that's interesting to me because God is the one who made these up, and God can't be wrong. But we don't think it's okay to have slaves today. And we don't believe that men are more valuable than women. And obviously, this shows some ways that that was not the thought back then. And then one other thing I noticed is when God was talking about altars, he said, "You should build my altar wherever I cause my name to be remembered, and I will come to you and bless you." And I thought, we don't do that enough. We don't hold God to such high esteem like that, and we don't just build an altar to worship him. So maybe we should have some altars in our lives, only unto the Lord. Thanks for listening. We'll talk again tomorrow.